Hey there, it's Curtis Stage, back again for another lecture in visual communications. This is Multimedia 110 at Los Angeles Mission College. So we're going to continue on with our discussion about visual theory as it relates to visual communication. Last lecture we talked about Gestalt theory, and if you remember, that was about the unified whole. Gestalt theory is a visual perception, and so one of the ways that we can kind of, dealing with sensory, and we can think about that here in this graph. We have on the left-hand side, of course, we have the sensory theories, and on the right, we'll get to those. Those are the perceptual theories. So again, those sensory theories are concerned with visual sensations, what the brain sees or fails to see. And of course, the visual cues, color, form, depth, movement, that kind of stuff. So constructivism is still, kind of keeping Gestalt ideas there. It's not like you're losing Gestalt. This is built upon that. So constructivism is kind of taking the idea of Gestalt and kind of and building on top of it. But a key difference here is it's really about kind of structurally how we see things. Gestalt is talking about the shapes of things, kind of the order of things, the symmetry of things, the space between things. Constructivism is how is an image constructed in our brain through our visuals. And we don't think about this. When you're walking around, the world, walking around your town, walking around campus maybe, you're not thinking about how do I see things? How does visual representation occur through my eyes and into my brain? How am I mapping this? We don't really think about the mapping. It just kind of falls into the background. This is why psychologists kind of come up with these theories, because they're thinking about how do we see things. For us to really become good designers, good artists, good filmmakers, good photographers, and visual communicators, I think it's really important for us to understand how do we see things, right? First, how is that happening? And then we can apply those principles to our designs and whatnot. So it's really important to kind of cover this stuff at the start. It's interesting, I think, and because it forms the basis for our communication skills that we want to have as artists, right? So it's forming that basis. So constructivism was started, I like to say it's making sense of perception. So Julian Hochberg, he's an American psychologist. This was, actually that date's wrong on there. That was, he was born, well, no, it might be about right. He's in his 90s. He's still alive. So it shouldn't have the C there. But I think he's born, so if he's in his 90s, it's around this time. He was at Columbia. And while he was teaching there, he was coming up with some theories. And he found that the human eye is constantly in motion as it scans an image. And this was how he started the constructivism theory. It was going to explain what was called eye fixations as a way for viewers to make sense of their perceptions. So kind of scientific here on this. This was, he's not a designer, he's not a visual communicator, he's not an artist, psychologist, and he's kind of, he's figuring out how do we make sense of the way we see things. And so he wrote some books on this and obviously wrote some papers on this at Columbia, and then wrote a couple books about this. And I'll provide a link to, you don't need to buy this book, but just so you know what the books are, I'll provide a couple links in our Canvas modules to his books on Amazon. And they were written a long time ago, but they're really cool. They're very analytical and theoretical. I like them, doesn't mean that you need to go out and read them, but one of them is pretty interesting. So I'll provide a link for you there on modules. So anyways, so this guy came up with this, this theory based off Gestalt, so he kind of built on the Gestalt theory. Now, constructivism, making sense of what we see, I don't want you to be confused here. You may have taken another class and you may have heard this word constructivism before. And there was also constructivism that was a Russian art movement, art and design movement. It was really kind of, it was in the 20s and the 30s, and it was, you saw a lot of propaganda posters that looked kind of like these. A lot of, well, the one on the right, the Tchaikovsky one's not propaganda, but there was a lot of propaganda pictures and designs that were created, and they use this very graphic style that was also called Constructivism. Now, we are going to talk about this style of design later in the semester in a whole different topic. So this will come back up again, but they're two different things. This Constructivism is how we see things. It's visual theory. That Constructivism is design, and it's coming out of the design world, and they don't have anything to do with each other. They just have a same name. But we'll be talking about both of them this class, so it's kind of interesting. I just don't want people to get confused, because you might have seen constructivist posters in other classes, and that can be a problem if you're kind of conflating the two. So that's what those look like, and they always have this kind of black, red, tan kind of thing, and you can look those up online. It's pretty cool. There's great designs, and we'll be talking about them later. What he came up with, Hochberg came up with, is started these experiments where he was using eye trackers, so eye tracking machines. He was kind of one of the first people to kind of use this technology to monitor how people looked at imagery in film, on TV, newspapers. They were starting to track the way we looked at things. And so the image on the right is an example of an eye tracker. It would be looking at you while you're looking at something, kind of weird, on a computer or whatever. And then the image on the left is actual data mapping of eye tracking from a television show. And the order you can since it's data, you can come up with. Now it's very complex now, of course. Back when he started this, back in the 70s and 80s, the technology wasn't as complex, but has grown quite a bit, and people use this quite a bit, and we'll talk about it more in a second. So this visualization that you see here, this graphic that you see on the left, that's recent. He didn't do this graphic, but it does. Those different colors are representative of time, how much time. The size is how much time they spend on certain portions of the image, and colors can represent different data points as well. It all seems boring, but it's really interesting in the terms of how do we look at images. You'll notice on this eye tracking, on this particular one, the person that was tracked didn't really look at, and surprising, didn't really look at anything else in the scene. They really were only looking at the figures in the scene. They weren't really looking at the drapes. If they were, it wasn't for any amount of time that could be tracked for very long. So they maybe scanned the drapes and the curtains and behind them for a little bit, but didn't spend much time on that. In the study, they used graphic images in his original studies, and it was found that viewers found the largest pictures or elements in the graphics or the page. They viewed those first. So if you look at these two newspapers, this is an old newspaper before really images were in newspapers, clearly boring to look at. Back then, I guess they're, just didn't really think about this too much, but the image technology wasn't there to put the images in the newspapers. Certainly, we're not going to really look at that newspaper as a whole on the left, and really nothing's going to stand out to us. So the one on the right, of course, a more modern newspaper, we're going to obviously look at the figure first. A big image, figure is going to be looked at first, and then we're going to move to the text, the main text, and then maybe other text. So, there's a lot of, the eye is moving around here, and then you'll probably get into the stories, right? So when you're doing layouts for newspapers and magazines, eye tracking is very important when you're doing graphical layouts. So newspapers use this a lot. What are the viewers going to look at first, second, third, fourth, fifth? What's the order of it, and how long are they going to look at something? And we see this on websites as well. When you're developing and designing websites, you're really thinking about how long is a viewer going to look at certain things, and what if they miss an important thing? Where do you place it so that it has an importance level, or if it has an importance level, where do you place it that it's not overshadowed by other content? And the web can be so overwhelming in web design that's going to be important for you to kind of figure out where to put things. And so eye tracking is really important for web designers often. So when we look at anything, we have to piece it together. So what he found was in his study is that our eye will look at certain points on an image and will assemble kind of a blueprint structure of what we're looking at. Again, we don't think about it. It's just kind of a blueprint that our brain puts together to make sense of the imagery and to make decisions. So it's kind of making sense and making decisions, right? So in effect, we construct images out of small focus points, right? Lots of small focus points. Our eye darts around the image, whatever we're looking at, it darts around it and finds and then we'll stay on some parts longer than others. So you'll look at things longer than others, and we'll see some images here in a minute that do that. You'll look at things longer than others, and then you'll look at something shorter. Your eye will dart around the screen. Your eye's probably darting around on me right now. You're probably looking at me a lot. Maybe your eye darts down here to the eye. Maybe it's trying to figure out, oh, okay, those are lips. Maybe it's darting over here for a little bit, especially with the red and then the word. Oh, he uses an apple, right? So maybe your eye is kind of darting over there and moving over there. Your eye's not doing much over here and here, because it's kind of a black, no space. There's nothing happening. But if I put something here or something here, your eye's going to move to that. So as an image maker, it's really important to know and compose an image based off of knowing that our eye is moving around an image. Of course, it's moving around an image. But how does it move around an image, and what are the key things that our brain subconsciously almost looks for? And again, we're putting together these things and almost making a map. And I put on here like a bitmap or a pixel map, almost pretty much like an image that gets created on a computer. Our brain is putting together that image. There's something called heat maps. So heat maps are another word for this eye tracking. And heat maps will, this one's not a heat map right here. This is still a tracking map. But here's a girl who has the apparatus on her head, actually, tracking her eyes. Heat maps look like this, where you'll see on the left, you'll see those colors. Obviously, the red is where our eyes are spending more time, and the green is less time. Yellow is, so it goes from red to green, right? And the yellow is a little bit more time, and the green is less time. The red is the most time. And as a designer, then this will allow you to decide, okay, where, so let's say this is a postcard or a web graphic. Well, okay, we also read pages left to right and top, you know, at least in the United States, we read left to right and top down. So where do you want to put an image to kind of help with that top down, left, right? Where should you place things because you know that people are going to look at certain things and they may start top and left. So that's where, you know, kind of as a graphic designer and a layout artist, you'll be able to kind of recompose an image to you know, maybe better get that attention from your audience. So in this one just has, you know, two possibilities here. It's an active state. This Constructivism is talking about an active state. You know, Gestalt really wasn't active. That's just really kind of, those principles were, you know, things that are occurring within the graphical image. And this is actually talking about how we actually look at things. So it's active. And so that's the key that I want you to understand here is Constructivism is about constructing an image. So the word construct is an active word. And designers, artists, filmmakers, photographers, of course, can take advantage of this. So things that affect what we see, right? And these are just a few, but probably kind of things that right off the bat we would all recognize and say yes. So size of things makes a difference. And this is in no order right here. Shape of things affects what we see. Recognition, right? And human faces. I think those two kind of go together. Eyes, right? That affects what we see. And then color, movement, and text. Text probably less than others. So if you look at this image right here, I don't know if a male or female was looking at this ad in a Vogue magazine, but you can see that the primary, you know, focal point of this image where people spent the most amount of time was on the model's face. and maybe going down a little bit over her to her hair, and I guess, and then maybe down to the cleavage a little bit, and then a little bit over in the actual words, like the words being read, and then I guess a little bit in the background there. I don't know why people would be looking back there, but they were looking back behind the bottle. So lots of things going on in here, but the human face, we are attracted to human faces. It's usually the first shape that we recognize as infants, is we recognize our mother and father's faces. And babies, newborns can't really see clearly. They can, can see kind of blurry. So of course we're using auditory cues when we're when we're infants, newborns. And then as our eyesight develops, the picture starts to come in focus. But the first things you're seeing are your mom and dad's faces, probably, and your siblings, whoever's connected to you, because you see them on a daily basis. So I guess human beings kind of are connected to faces just anyway. And so it makes sense that our eyes in an ad or a graphic are going to go to a face first, and then they'll kind of start hitting other things second, third, fourth, fifth, and down the line. So this list here of size, shape, recognition. When I mean recognition, I mean you're recognizing someone in the ad or in the graphic or in the photograph. If you're looking at a photograph, do I recognize that person? Oftentimes that's what we do. We scan in a room. Do I recognize anybody in this room? We can do it pretty quick. And some people you're like, I think I've met that person before. They look familiar. Our brain really quickly, and I don't know the math on this, we scan images or faces every day just in our daily lives, not even in graphics or on TV and in films, but just people you see around you in the real world. We're scanning faces to see if we recognize them. We don't think about it too much, but we actually are doing it all the time. And so artists can take advantage of this. Filmmakers can take advantage of this, especially in movies and TV. And so I'll bring that into kind of the animated world or the film world. Here's some eye scans from some movies. The one on the left, some eye scans. This is interesting. On the top is an eye scan of this is both of English speaking. So you can see that there's an English subtitle on the top in A, and there's a Spanish subtitle in B. The person that's viewing this is English speaking. They don't speak any Spanish. So they're viewed both of these things, both of these clips. It wasn't just this, it was from a movie. They viewed both of them, and you can see their eye darting down to the English subtitles because they understand English, but you can see the kind of what they're looking at between the two figures carrying this chair or this couch. And then it's funny because the English speaking person they'll still look down at the Spanish subtitles, but they can't really understand them, so they're not really paying as much attention to those. So their eye won't hit those very much. So subtitles don't make a difference when you're watching them. They're just kind of annoying, I guess, to you if you don't speak that language, but you're not really looking at them very much. You're still looking at the action. But it is kind of interesting how much the English-speaking person will look at the English subtitles, even though they speak English. So they're looking down at the English subtitles, and the film is in English, and they're looking down there and they're seeing it, and they're not missing any of the action either. They're darting really quickly. Those colors are how quick, and I don't know what color associates with how quick they're associating, but the colors have to do with speed. The one on the right from Hulk, this is interesting too. What filmmakers will do is they want to keep your attention at a certain spot on a film. So they'll have an edit point where they'll see, if you look at, kind of back and forth between these from C to D, they want your eye in a certain spot, right? So on C, you can, in the graphic C in the middle, middle left, you can see that our eye is tracking on the actor's face. And then the very next cut, your eye is in the same spot, and the main character, which is Hulk, you don't really see him back here in this graphic too much, but is the Hulk comes into the shot, and our eye is automatically in that same location. So our eye doesn't, sometimes what editors will do and cinematographers will do is they'll set up one shot and they'll have your eye right here, let's say, and the very next scene, your eye will be not moving so much. The very next scene, the object will be in relatively the same spot. So when you cut from one shot to another shot, the object is in the same place relatively. So your eye is not darting around so much. It really confuses the viewer in a movie if you have to, like, if you're looking down in the bottom right corner on one shot and the very next cut, right, you're in a movie theater, the very next cut, you have to look all the way up in the corner. That would be very difficult. So if I edited something and I have your eyes down here where my hand is, and then I cut, and then the very next shot you have to look up here, that's throwing you off. So they try to keep from one shot to the next your eye in the same place, and that is this constructivism, right? That's what we're talking about here. How do you kind of move the person's eye around for them to understand, visually understand what's going on? Your next project, your next little assignment that you're going to do is going to kind of cover this. So when you read through that assignment, remember what I'm talking about here, about how our eye moves around and how we can go from one thing to the next and keep and move a viewer's eye to where you want it to move. That's going to be your next assignment number 2. So you'll read all about that and you'll understand what I'm talking about because you've seen this video, and then you'll do that assignment too. So this is another, eye tracking here have shown that there's similarities and patterns in the way people view and remember complex things. We can remember things better through visual stimulation. We can remember things, and so it's really important if you're, newspaper, again, bringing up the newspaper, where you're placing things so that people are going to remember and interact with your stories or whatever, and the important things are coming up first, maybe. This is interesting. Over in the orange box, online readers scan stories, right? They scan stories in an online environment. So if you're reading the news on your iPad in the morning, you're scanning stories, and I know I do this. I'll be sitting in my bed with my coffee in my hand, and I'll scan kind of my iPad, and I won't read the full story yet. I'll kind of scan and look at it. Kind of interesting the way we've kind of transitioned. But newspaper, people who read actual newspapers, and there's not many of them, I guess, as many as there were, they start from the top to the bottom, and they will read from the beginning to the end. So just these studies have been out there that this is what's happening, and we're losing that. Not that that's a total bad thing, but it's kind of going away because we don't have as many newspapers anymore, physical newspapers. The next sentence in this orange box, big headlines and big photos get a lot more attention in print. Online readers went to navigational elements and links. So when you're on the web, you're looking at links and navigation elements longer so let's say you're on CNN.com, you're going to be looking for links and navigational elements on a web page. But if you're reading a newspaper, you're going to be looking at the pictures, big pictures first, and the headlines, and kind of the structure of things. So when we're designing, we can be thinking about how that works, and maybe we can kind of transfer some of those ideas that newspapers, where we're looking at things a certain way, maybe that can be transferred into online media as well. And then photojournalistic photos of people. They were strong attention getters in both cases, both in online and in newspapers. And photojournalistic photos were preferred over studio photography in magazines and newspapers, interestingly enough. So images that are taken out in the field, even if this is National Geographic, viewers would spend more time looking at those photos taken out in the field, let's say rhinos or elephants or whatever, National Geo, than photos taken in studio. Even if the photos in studio are better photos, people spend more time looking at the ones out in the field. So that's kind of an interesting thing too. And people preferred color over black and white photography for some reason. You know, as an artist, I like both, but people preferred that. Okay, so here's a fun one. There's this eye track. You know, there's a lot of eye tracking that's been going on for years now, and so the graphic on the left, men versus women. So you've got this one. It's interesting. The one on the left, if we look right here, the graphic on the left on the men's side, you can see that the men are spending a lot of time looking at the face, again, the red part, the hot part. They're looking at the face, and then they'll maybe move down across the body, and they won't spend as much time on the actual text in the ad. But on the right, the women, in this eye track shop, the women are really spending a lot of time reading, because the red, you can see the red in the text. They're spending a lot, yes, they're looking at the woman's face just as much as the men, and her body just as much as the men. But the men aren't spending any time, very little time, not no time, but very little time reading the text in the ad, whereas the women are really reading it. And on the right, this is how long we are looking at an image. Women, you know, the length of time and where. So in this baseball player, the men were looking at the player, finding out who it is. So again, trying to find out who this person is. Do I recognize that batter? So they're spending a lot of time on the face. And then they're tracking down across the torso and down to their crotch area, I guess. And the women weren't even interested in that. They were only interested in looking at the face and do I recognize this person? And it's hard to see, but there's a little bit of purple around. So the purple is less viewing. The men looked down at the cleat, down at the shoe. They looked at the crowd a little bit. The women weren't really looking at the crowd behind the batter. They weren't really looking down low in the image very much. A little bit they were, but they were really focused up on the face, and that was kind of it. So kind of interesting. And the last one here in this kind of tracking thing is the Mona Lisa. You probably know this image, one of the most famous paintings in the world. If you go to the Louvre in France, you can see this painting. It's painted by Leonardo da Vinci, and it's interesting when you go see it in person. You're expecting this amazingly, you know, it's like this painting that's historical. It's one of the famous paintings, right? And you see it in person, it's only this big. It's really small. So a lot of people are crowded around this thing when you go to the museum and see it. But when they tracked people looking at it, here was the heat map on it, and it's interesting. I mean, people obviously spending a lot of time on Mona Lisa's face and expression, and the red, of course, and more time. Going out to the blue, less time. And so if we really isolate that on the right, you're really seeing what they're looking at and what Leonardo created here, the shape that he created when he painted this. I don't know if I mean, there was no face tracking in the Renaissance period. I mean, we're talking, 400 years ago. Almost 500 years ago. There's no face tracking. There's no eye tracking here. So, but he knew as an artist kind of, what he wanted to accomplish and what he wanted people to look at. And so you can kind of see what he was doing. Pretty interesting. So constructivist theory helps us to understand exactly how certain visual cues are noticed and how others are not noticed. So that's the key here. How certain visual cues are noticed and how other ones are not noticed. What are we looking at, for how long, and then how can we take that as an artist and use that? So throughout this semester, we're going to talk about how do we create good design, good art, good photography, good film. And to know this, we have to understand how do we build good compositions. And to know how we understand or how we build good compositions, we have to talk about an idea like constructivism. So we've got Gestalt theory and we've got constructivism now under our belt. That's going to wrap it up for our lecture number 2. And when we come back for lecture number 3, we're going to continue this on with some more theories about how we see things. So we will see you in lecture number 3.